Forget everything you thought you knew about Ciaphas Cain. This video exposes the hidden truth behind his legacy, revealing how his memoirs have impacted generations of Imperial citizens. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, heroes are as rare as they are necessary. The Imperium of man, stretched across countless worlds and beset by enemies from without and within, survives on the strength of its warriors and the legends they inspire. But what if one of its greatest heroes, Commissar Ciaphas Cain, the so-called hero of the Imperium, was in fact a self-proclaimed coward and opportunist whose legendary status was built on a foundation of fortunate accidents and careful image management? Today, we dive deep into the controversial legacy of Commissar Ciaphas Cain through the lens of his secret memoirs, To Serve the Emperor, A Commissar's Life, edited and annotated by Inquisitor Amberly Vale of the Ordo Xenos. These candid confessions, never meant for public consumption, reveal a man far more complex than Imperial propaganda suggests, a man whose actions, however reluctantly taken, shaped Imperial policy and military doctrine for generations to come. Part 1. The Man Behind the Myth. Before we can understand Cain's impact on the Imperium, we must first understand the man himself. Born on the hive world of Kephia, Cain's early life remains largely unknown, even in his own accounts. What we do know is that he attended the Shola Progenium following the loss of his parents, where he was trained to become a commissar, a political officer attached to the Imperial Guard, responsible for maintaining morale and discipline, often through extreme measures. The traditional image of a commissar is one of unflinching, almost fanatical devotion to the emperor, willing to execute any soldier showing cowardice or hesitation. Cain, however, presents himself in stark contrast to this stereotype. In his memoirs, he repeatedly confesses to being motivated primarily by self-preservation rather than heroism or duty. Consider this excerpt from his writings about his approach to commissarial duties.
I quickly learned that a commissar who makes himself feared too much tends to suffer unfortunate accidents in the heat of battle. I chose a different path, gaining genuine respect from the troops by appearing to share their dangers while actually minimizing my personal risk. A calculated approach that served me well.
This pragmatic philosophy guided Cain throughout his career and, ironically, led to many of his greatest heroic achievements. By attempting to flee from danger, he often inadvertently charged headlong into even greater threats, emerging victorious through a combination of skill, quick thinking, and extraordinary luck. His association with the 597th Valhallan Regiment became legendary, though Cain himself attributes much of his success to the competence of soldiers like Colonel Regina Castine, Major Rupert Brokelaw, and especially his aide, Ferric Jurgen, a malodorous but unfailingly loyal soldier who, significantly, possessed the rare psychic null ability as a blank. Cain's career spanned over a century of active service, during which he faced virtually every major threat to the Imperium: Tyranids, Necrons, Orcs, the forces of Chaos, Tau, and even Dark Eldar. His survival against such odds alone would mark him as remarkable. But it was his consistent emergence as the hero of these encounters that built his reputation to mythic proportions. Part 2. The Reluctant Hero's Impact on Military Doctrine. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of Cain's legacy is how a man so intent on avoiding danger came to fundamentally influence Imperial military doctrine, particularly regarding Xenos threats. Cain's experiences with Tyranids, documented across multiple campaigns, provided invaluable intelligence on this existential threat. His observations on Tyranid behavior, particularly the function of synapse creatures and the hive mind's adaptability, led to tactical innovations that saved countless Imperial worlds. Consider the Adumbrian campaign, where Cain's insights into gene-stealer infiltration tactics revolutionized the Imperium's approach to detecting and purging these insidious vanguard organisms. Prior to Cain's contributions, Many worlds had fallen because the threat was identified too late. His detailed accounts of how to recognize the subtle signs of infestation became required reading at Schola Progenium facilities, training commissars, and inquisitorial acolytes. Inquisitor Amberly Vale notes in her commentary,
While Cain may have stumbled upon many of his insights while seeking to ensure his own survival, the value of his experiences cannot be overstated. His detailed observations of Tyranid behavior patterns during the Pari-Remunda and Adumbria campaigns directly inform the Inquisition's containment protocols, saving billions of lives across dozens of worlds.
Similarly, Cain's encounters with Necrons challenged the Imperium's understanding of this ancient threat. Before his detailed accounts, many Imperial commanders considered Necrons to be merely another machine race. Cain's first-hand experiences with their phase technology, self-repair capabilities, and the true horror of their awakening tunes provided critical intelligence that changed how the Imperium approached these engagements. On Adumbria, his tactical flexibility in adapting to the Necron threat, born of self-preservation rather than strategic brilliance, nevertheless established precedents that would be adopted by Imperial commanders facing similar situations. His emphasis on targeting command nodes and cryptex over attempting to achieve body counts against endlessly repairing warriors represented a paradigm shift in anti-Necron tactics. Even in his dealings with the Tau, Cain's approach differed from typical Imperial dogma. While maintaining absolute loyalty to the Imperium, his pragmatic alliance with Tau forces against Tyranids on Gravelax demonstrated a flexibility rarely seen in Imperial officers. This precedent has been cited in several subsequent campaigns where temporary cooperation with Xenos against greater threats became necessary. Part 3. The Chaos Connection. Unexpected contributions to the Long War. Perhaps most significant among Cain's contributions to Imperial security were his encounters with Chaos forces and his unwitting disruption of multiple heretical plots. For a man with no psychic ability and limited theological knowledge, Cain demonstrated an uncanny knack for stumbling upon and subsequently foiling the machinations of the ruinous powers. On Periamunda, his discovery and destruction of a Chaos artifact prevented a potential warp breach that could have consumed the entire planet. On Adumbria, he exposed a Slaneshi cult that had infiltrated the planetary government. Most notably on Jurasia, Cain's confrontation with the Chaos Space Marine Amélie Dubois disrupted a ritual that could have delivered an entire subsector to the forces of Chaos. Inquisitor Vale's annotations provide crucial context.
While Cain attributes his repeated clashes with Chaos to poor luck, pattern analysis conducted by the Ordo Malleus suggests something more. The statistical probability of a single Imperial officer encountering and successfully thwarting so many disparate Chaos operations exceeds rational explanation. Some within the Inquisition have speculated that Cain may have been an unwitting instrument of the Emperor's will, guided by divine providence rather than mere coincidence.
This suggestion that the self-proclaimed coward might have been a tool of the Emperor's design adds a fascinating theological dimension to Cain's legacy. Within certain branches of the ecclesiarchy, debate continues about whether Cain's survival instinct was itself a form of divine guidance, directing him precisely where the Emperor needed him most. More concretely, Cain's detailed accounts of Chaos operations, particularly the methods of cult infiltration and the subtle signs of Chaos corruption, have become valuable training material for inquisitorial acolytes. His observations on the psychological impacts of warp exposure and the progression of Chaos influence have helped refine the Imperium's identification and containment protocols for potential heretical outbreaks. Part 4. The Sociological Impact, a different kind of hero. Beyond his military contributions, Cain's most enduring legacy may be the psychological impact his story has had on Imperial citizens and institutions. The carefully cultivated public image of the hero of the Imperium served a vital propaganda purpose during his lifetime, but the limited circulation of his actual memoirs among high-ranking officials has created a fascinating dichotomy. To the general public, Commissar Cain remains the archetypal Imperial hero, brave, selfless, and unflinching in the face of the Imperium's enemies. His exploits, heavily edited and embellished by Imperial propagandists, inspire countless young men and women to enlist in the Imperial Guard. Statues of Cain stand in memorial squares across dozens of worlds he helped defend, and dramatized accounts of his adventures are performed in theaters throughout the Imperium. Among the upper echelons of Imperial power, however, those few with access to his unexpurgated memoirs understand a more nuanced truth. This select group, primarily high-ranking inquisitors, lord generals, and certain members of the administratum, gain insight into a different kind of heroism. One born not of fearlessness but of functioning effectively despite fear. Inquisitor Vale addresses this directly in her introduction to the compiled memoirs.
I have chosen to preserve these accounts not to diminish Cain's achievements, which remain remarkable regardless of his internal motivations, but to provide future leaders of the Imperium with a more honest template of heroism. The Imperium has no shortage of martyrs eager to die for the Emperor. What it lacks are survivors who can continue to serve effectively across decades of constant warfare. In this, if nothing else, Ciaphas Cain provides an invaluable example.
This perspective represents a subtle but significant shift in how the Imperium conceptualizes heroism. While public propaganda continues to emphasize unflinching sacrifice, internal leadership development increasingly values Cain's model of adaptive survival and practical effectiveness. Several Shola Progenium facilities now include heavily redacted versions of Cain's actual tactical approaches in their commissarial training, emphasizing his ability to maintain troop morale and combat effectiveness through positive reinforcement rather than summary execution. No analysis of Cain's legacy would be complete without examining the profound impact he had on those who served with him directly. Despite his self-proclaimed selfishness, Cain's actions engendered fierce loyalty among the troops under his nominal command, particularly the 597th Valhallan Regiment. Colonel Regina Castine, who rose from obscurity to become one of the most decorated guard officers of her generation, frequently cited Cain's influence in her own leadership development. In her military memoirs, she writes,
Commissar Cain taught me that authority flows from respect, not fear. While many commissars rule through terror, Cain showed that a leader who stands with her troops, who is seen to share their dangers rather than merely driving them toward danger, can accomplish the impossible. The 9717th record speaks for itself.
Indeed, under the joint leadership of Castine and Cain, the 597th Valhallan achieved a victory record that remains a statistical outlier among Imperial Guard regiments, particularly given the extraordinary threats they encountered. Their success ratio against Tyranid and Necron forces specifically has never been matched by any comparable Guard unit. Perhaps more telling is the impact Cain had on Jurgen, his aide for most of his career. Though Jurgen's own accounts are limited, Inquisitor Vale's annotations suggest that this seemingly simple soldier developed significantly under Cain's influence, eventually becoming an effective operative in his own right. Jurgen's status as a psychic blank made him invaluable in countless encounters with warp entities, but it was Cain's willingness to look past Jurgen's social limitations that allowed this asset to serve the Imperium effectively. Beyond military circles, Cain's most significant personal legacy may be his relationship with Inquisitor Amberly Vale herself. While both maintained professional discretion in their memoirs and official records, careful analysis of deployment schedules and the tone of Vale's annotations suggests a deep personal connection that spanned decades. This unusual alliance between the Commissariat and the Inquisition facilitated information sharing and cooperative operations that would have been unlikely otherwise. Part 6. The Literary Impact, Cain's Memoirs as Historical Documents. As historical documents, Cain's memoirs represent a unique contribution to Imperial knowledge. Unlike most official Imperial histories, which present events through the lens of institutional propaganda, Cain's private accounts offer unvarnished perspectives on key moments in recent Imperial history. His descriptions of frontline conditions during major campaigns provide invaluable insights into the practical realities of Imperial warfare. Whereas official histories might describe the defense of Perlia as a glorious last stand made possible by the inspiring presence of a legendary commissar, Cain's account reveals the confusion, logistical failures, and desperate improvisation that actually characterized the campaign. Historian Gerentius Plinius of the Administratum Historical Division notes,
while restricted from public access, Commissar Cain's memoirs represent one of the most valuable first-person historical sources of the late 41st millennium. His position as both a ranking officer with access to strategic information and a frontline combatant directly engaging with the enemy provides perspective rarely found in a single source. His candor regarding Imperial failures and inefficiencies, while potentially demoralizing to the general public, offers crucial lessons for military planners and historians.
This historical value extends beyond military matters. Cain's observations of civilian life across dozens of Imperial worlds provide anthropological insights into how ordinary citizens experienced life under the Imperium. His accounts of cultural variations, from the ice warriors of Valhalla to the desert nomads of Talern, capture details often overlooked in official Imperial records. Perhaps most significantly, Cain's memoirs document interactions with xeno-species that contradict simplified Imperial propaganda. His nuanced observations of Tau social structures, detailed analysis of Tyranid adaptation patterns, and unprecedented accounts of Necron behavioral anomalies have all contributed significantly to xenological studies within the Inquisition's Ordo Xenos. Part 7. The Shadow Legacy. What Cain Never Knew. One of the most fascinating aspects of Cain's legacy lies in the consequences of his actions that he himself never witnessed or understood. Inquisitor Vale's annotations reveal several instances where Cain's seemingly minor decisions or chance encounters had far-reaching implications for Imperial security. On Gravalax, for instance, Cain's successful navigation of the complex political situation between Imperial, Tau, and Genestealer forces not only saved the planet, but established a precedent for how the Imperium would manage similar three-way conflicts on dozens of border worlds. The diplomatic protocols developed following the Gravalax incident, informally known as the Cain Containment, have been implemented successfully on at least 7 major border worlds facing similar infiltration threats. More dramatically, Cain's destruction of the Chaos artifact on Perimunda had consequences far beyond preventing an immediate warp breach. Inquisitorial records indicate that the artifact was part of a larger network of similar devices being activated across the sector as part of a coordinated Chaos offensive. By destroying the Perimunda node, Cain unwittingly disrupted the entire operation, buying the Imperium decades of relative stability in that region. Vale notes, in a particularly heavily classified annotation,
The full extent of what Cain prevented on Perimunda remains unknown to him. Analysis by the Ordo Malleus suggests the ritual, had it been completed, would have created a stable warp corridor connecting directly to the Eye of Terror, potentially allowing a chaos incursion on a scale not seen since the Horus Heresy. That this was prevented by a commissar seeking a quiet assignment away from the front lines represents either extraordinary luck or, as some have suggested, the direct intervention of the Emperor's will.
Similarly, Cain's confrontation with the Necron tomb on Simia Orichalcae provided the Adeptus Mechanicus with invaluable data on previously unknown Necron defensive systems. The technical information recovered from this encounter directly informed the development of new shield harmonics for Imperial naval vessels, improving their survivability against Necron Gauss weapons by an estimated 23%. Part 8. The Controversial Legacy, Debates and Criticisms. Despite his undeniable contributions to Imperial security, Cain's legacy remains controversial in certain circles. The disparity between his public image and private confessions raises difficult questions about the nature of heroism and the Imperium's reliance on propaganda. Among military theorists, the Cain Doctrine, emphasizing flexibility, morale through leadership by example, and tactical adaptability over rigid adherence to protocol, has both fervent advocates and harsh critics. Traditionalists within the commissariat point to Cain's lenient disciplinary record as evidence of dangerous compromise, while reformers cite the exceptional performance of units under his supervision as justification for his methods. Lord General Zivan, a frequent commander of forces including Cain, offered this assessment in his military memoirs.
Commissar Cain's unconventional approach initially appeared to contradict Imperial doctrine. However, results speak louder than theory. Units under Cain's spiritual guidance consistently outperformed comparable forces in combat effectiveness, morale resilience, and casualty-to-victory ratios. While I would not recommend his methods for universal application, in the specific contexts where Cain operated, his approach proved optimal.
Within the Inquisition, debate continues about whether Cain's memoirs should be more widely distributed among imperial leadership. Proponents argue that his honest accounts of fear overcome through discipline represent a more realistic and therefore more valuable template for imperial officers than mythologized tales of fearless martyrs. Opponents counter that undermining the heroic mythology surrounding figures like Cain risks damaging morale throughout the Imperium. Philosophical questions also arise regarding Cain's self-assessment as a coward. Many psychologists within the Schola Progenium argue that Cain's actions, whatever his claimed motivations, consistently demonstrated exceptional courage. His repeated willingness to engage directly with the most dangerous enemies of mankind, Tyranid hive tyrants, Chaos Space Marines, and Necron lords belies his self-characterization regardless of his internal emotional state. Part 9. The Enduring Influence. Cain in the current Imperium. 2 centuries after his apparent death, though rumors persistently surface of Cain emerging from retirement for one final mission, Ciaphas Cain's influence continues to shape imperial policy and culture in subtle but significant ways. At the policy level, the Cain protocols for first response to potential Tyranid infiltration remain standard procedure for imperial worlds in sectors bordering known hive fleet activity. These protocols derive directly from Cain's experiences on Desolatia and Nusquam Fundamentibus, emphasize early detection through population screening and immediate isolation of suspected infection vectors, approaches that have demonstrably improved survival rates on threatened worlds. Militarily, several elite guard regiments explicitly model their commissarial integration practices on what has become known as the Valhallan method, the collaborative command approach developed between Cain and Colonel Castine that transformed the 597th from an untested composite unit to one of the most decorated regiments in Imperial history. Culturally, Cain's legacy manifests in the popular entertainment and propaganda of the Imperium. Dramatized versions of his exploits, heavily sanitized and rewritten to emphasize his heroism rather than his luck or survival instincts, remain among the most popular entertainments on Imperial worlds. These dramatic presentations serve to inspire Imperial citizens and maintain morale in the face of constant threats. Perhaps most interestingly, a subtle shift has occurred in how commissars are portrayed in Imperial propaganda over the centuries since Cain's service. While the traditional image of the stern, execution-ready disciplinarian remains, increasingly commissars are also shown fighting alongside their troops, leading from the front rather than the rear. This evolution in the commissarial ideal, whether consciously or not, reflects Cain's enduring influence on the institution he served so reluctantly yet effectively. Conclusion: the man and the myth. As we conclude our analysis of Commissar Ciaphas Cain's legacy, we return to the fundamental contradiction at its heart. a self-proclaimed coward whose actions shaped the Imperium for generations. A reluctant hero whose impact far exceeded that of countless willing martyrs, a man whose attempts to avoid danger repeatedly placed him at the crucial nexus of major historical events. Whether by extraordinary luck, the Emperor's direct guidance, or simply the unacknowledged courage that drove him despite his fears, Cain's service to the Imperium stands as a testament to the complex reality behind Imperial myths. His legacy reminds us that heroism comes in many forms, and that the Imperium's survival depends not just on those willing to die for the Emperor, but on those with the skill and determination to live and continue fighting in his name. In the final analysis, perhaps Inquisitor Amberly Vale best captured the essence of Cain's contribution in her epilogue to his collected memoirs.
History will remember Ciaphas Cain as the hero of the Imperium, a title he would have dismissed with characteristic self-depreciation. Yet regardless of his own assessment, the fact remains. Worlds stand that would have fallen, regiments fought that would have fled, and victories were claimed that would have been defeats, all because of this one man's actions. The Imperium's memory may be imperfect, its propaganda often disconnected from reality, but in proclaiming Cain a hero, it has perhaps accidentally stumbled upon a greater truth than even Cain himself ever recognized.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but even there, individuals matter. Ciaphas Cain's legacy proves that a single person, however reluctant, can change the course of history. For the Imperium of man, forever beset by enemies beyond counting, such heroes, whether they acknowledge the title or not, represent the thin line between survival and extinction.